Dr. Suresh, actually, we can see her. Do you want to just share only the presentation screen?
I just did that, okay, because I had to just go out and just give me a minute. You don't see the screen.
No, now we are not seeing your screen.
Just one. Sharing. Screen. See it now? Do you
Yeah,
see?
we can see your screen, but have you said share the entire screen or share one window?
I've shared the entire screen, and
So
right now it is on slideshow.
yeah, yeah, we can see your screen right now, but we'll be able to see everything that's going on your screen. That's the only thing.
And then just wait a minute. That is
I think it is in place.
that I always have.
I think it is in place.
Okay, now what happens? Now do you see it?
Yeah.
Now do you see? I don't know what is everything that you're able to see.
It's okay.
I think it is in place.
We can see your screen. So you can try opening another window and then I can tell you if we can see that window or not.
No,
Okay.
next slide. Maybe next slide.
Okay, next slide. Okay.
Maybe next slide. Then she will be able to appreciate. Yeah, it's in place.
No, that is not. Actually, just before this session, we had a conversation about sharing the entire screen and sharing only the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what.
So right now,
anyway, it's okay. I think we can start now.
okay. Right now
Yeah?
it's the application window. Okay.
Yes,
And,
yes.
yeah. So hopefully we don't have any glitches, and yeah.
Right. Okay. So, hello everyone. I am Devika. You might be wondering where Amrita is today. Amrita could not attend today's session, so I'm filling in for her. I'm the course coordinator of this NPTEL course. And I'm very happy today to welcome Dr. Suresh Kumar to talk to us about bird migration, which is a very interesting and an important topic in ornithology. So Dr. Suresh Kumar is a faculty and scientist at Wildlife Institute of India. Over the last 28 years, he has worked in different landscapes, right from the Himalayan mountains to the coasts in Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. In his early years, he discovered a new subspecies of the Sclater's monal pheasant in northeastern India. And he has also worked on Arunachal macaques and the olive ridley turtles on the eastern coast, on the east coast. His research now focuses on tracking fine-scale movements and migration of birds and turtles in India. And he's also studying how Indian monsoon is influencing the migrating patterns of the birds. So, sir, we are very excited to have you with us today. And yeah, we are all ready to listen to your lecture.
Okay. So thank you so much, Devika, and it's a pleasure to be making this presentation and talking about one of my favorite subjects, that is why do birds undertake these kinds of movements, and there are those few special birds that does that. And yeah, so it keeps us excited, and it's that curiosity quotient in us that keeps getting lit up when we see some of these birds do what they do. So yeah, it's always nice to talk about it, and I think this is my third NPTEL course where I'm talking about it. So some of my texty slides are kind of similar, but I myself will get bored. So, and birds are interesting. Bird migration is interesting. So I've tried to bring in some photographs and to keep your audience entertained with this lecture. Okay. So as I speak right now, spring is setting in here in Dehradun, and there's a lot of birds that have started to vocalize, sing, actually, and they are just getting ready for their breeding season. And with that, I'm seeing quite a few birds that are returning back from southern India, possibly from where you're sitting, Devika. They're coming from there all the way up here. and many of them would be going up into the Himalayas to breed, while some of these birds would also cross over the Himalayas. So that gets really, really interesting to see, especially the white wagtails. The gray wagtails are going to go up higher up in the Himalayas. Some populations would go beyond also, but the white wagtails are definitely going beyond. So amazing, such small, tiny birds. And the other interesting thing that is I mean, just narrating these two examples is that that they're so small, and it's going to be energetically very, very expansive to move up, to fly such long distances and go up and breed in those amazing landscapes out there. But it's going to be harsh. But there's a lot to do with timing, that it is so precise and so accurate. So, bird migration is definitely a very, very interesting topic, and I'm sure for your course participants, this is definitely going to be very interesting for them post this. So, this is something that people have always been observing. So, the strange and mysterious phenomenon in life of birds, their migratory journeys, and often it's repeated and at certain times. And it also appears that they come exactly around the same time. And some of these birds have I mean, some of these birds, these migratory birds, have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And this is being observed by a lot of people, and definitely the curiosity aspect comes in. So, simply to put it, these birds are on their annual pilgrimage, which we call migration. So, where do these birds come from, and where are they going, and why? So, different populations are coming from different places, and they come at different times also. There is a slight variations in the time that they arrive. But then the question is, why take so much of an effort to be moving between these their breeding and wintering grounds, which often involve several thousand kilometers migration journey? So, a lot of people in the past, including Aristotle, have had their own explanations to, explain what happens with these birds that are migrating. So he believed that birds undergo transmutations. So in summer, the redstarts annually transform themselves into robins in winter. So this is what was the general thought process. Of course, this is way back in time when people would hardly move from one place to another. Then, much later, it was believed that swallows spend their winters buried in swamps or frozen lakes. So, this is also part of the transmutation story, that for a certain time of the year when it is not visible, it's believed that they just go and bury themselves in the lake bed and things like that. Including the Nepalese folklore. I've been studying barn swallows for some time now, all along the Himalayas. So as we travel to these different places, there were, these folk stories, Nepalese folk stories of the birds going down to Kasi, that is Varanasi, and they die there in Varanasi and come back, are reborn again, and then they come back up into the Himalayas to breed. So this is the kind of stories that people imagine with these birds that are migratory birds. Of course, we now know that that's not the case, and that these birds are migrating to different parts of the world. Birds are amongst one of the most successful living organisms on the planet. Their ability to fly has just taken them to every nook and corner of the planet. And those that did migrate or move, definitely did better. So as of today, what we know is approximately 40% of the bird species known are migratory species, so often migrating long distances. And when we talk about bird migration, then one of the most popular birds that comes up is more of a textbook example is the Arctic tern, which migrates between the poles. So breeds in the North Pole, but winters in the South Pole. And they also known to undertake the longest migrations. So yes, so they do migrate long. This is a bird which is associated with water, and they both, primarily in the marine system. They would also move through areas inland, as we know, but these are birds that could just land anywhere in water. So their passage routes are all over water, except for some populations of a certain time of their migration that they may be crossing over land. So they could stop anywhere, forage anywhere, and there is no rush or no hurry to get to each of these poles, each of these directions. So definitely holds the record for one of the longest migrants moving between the poles. Now, the other extreme, and as I speak right now, I'm quite sure the Blythe's reed warbler, very small bird, is now getting ready to start off on its migration back to Europe or Western Europe. So you can see in this image here the entire lot of the Blythe's reed warbler that we know winters in India, in peninsular India, all over India. Why? What is it that they find so suitable that they have to move all the way from there to come in here? They could also have gone down into Africa, but they don't. So this is something really, really interesting. And what has shaped these migrations, or what has shaped this particular species linkage between the Indian landmass and the European continent? So when we get into the details, this gets more and more interesting. Uh, so migration as such is the ability of the migrating birds. Some of them make non-stop flights. It's a test of their endurance. So there are several examples which I'll be coming to. So without doubt, this is one of the most remarkable things that we see in the animal kingdom, that some of them are able to do this non-stop flights. So the best example, the record holder for that is the bar-tailed godwit. Populations of bar-tailed godwit that breed in the Alaskan peninsula, they migrate from there all the way down to New Zealand. Okay, and this is on their autumn migration, go down. But during the spring migration, that is when they are returning back to the breeding grounds in Alaska, they take a different route. So they have a circuitous path. Now, on the return, they will stop at several locations. There are some key stopover sites, foraging grounds, and then they return. But on their downward journey, they do this, what is known as non-stop flight over water. They are associated with water, but they cannot land in the middle of the ocean. So they are wading birds. They need to remain close to the land. And sorry. So they will fly for about 11 to 12 days non-stop going down to New Zealand and then thereafter return. So why do they do these kinds of migrations? And what you will also notice here, this is trans-hemispheric, moving from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. Then we have the other example of the Amur falcons, which I'm researching on. Again, fabulous bird. Again, very, very interesting. And they do these non-stop flights from northern or northeastern parts of Asia, where they breed. They come down into northeast India and thereafter go down all the way down to South Africa. But between northeast India and the Great Horn of Africa, which is Somalia, the country there, between these birds undertake non-stop flights of something like 6,000 kilometers non-stop. Why would they do that? Unlike in the case of the bar-tailed godwit, where it is open waters, there is no scope for landing anywhere. Here, there is the Indian landmass where they can actually land, but they don't do that. I mean, not every bird does that, but yeah. So it's interesting as to why they are making these non-stop flights. So there has to be some strategy. Now, if you look at the other examples of record holders, then the bar-headed geese are very interesting again, quite fascinating birds, large-bodied water birds. And as I speak now, they're returning here to the Himalayan foothills where they will be choosing certain wetlands where they will stop over. This is known as the staging grounds. And from the staging grounds, they're going to wait for the right time. And just like a mountaineer trying to summit to reach the peak, they're going to start off on their path early in the morning, maybe possibly around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, to climb in one shot straight to the highest of the peaks of the Himalayas, the ridge line, and then cross over into Tibet. So the intervening habitat is not the kind of area that they would land anywhere. They just simply cannot land there. So they need to make a lot of preparations. Now, high up here in the Himalayas, there is low oxygens, and for flight, energetically demanding, oxygen demand is very high, and flying through these hypoxic environments is physiologically quite challenging. But somehow the bar-headed geese have evolved strategy to be able to counter that. So they have higher hemoglobin content, which traps whatever little amount of oxygen that is there to facilitate that. But given having said that, the birds still, have to strategize quite smartly, effectively to plan on their journey across. So this is one of the record holders of being able to fly, across the high Himalayan range to go across into the Tibetan Plateau and into Mongolia to breed. So the tracking studies by researchers from USGS and BNHS collaborative study, they found these kind of migratory pattern. I'm not going to go and get into the details of it, but it's extremely interesting in the sense that there are bar-headed geese that go all the way down to the southern tip of India, while there are other populations that move only till about Himachal Pradesh or maybe till Gujarat. So there are different populations of bar-headed geese having different strategies. But of course, they all are going to climb the Himalayas and cross over into the Tibetan Plateau and go further to the north. Now, yet another interesting example is of the demoiselle crane, a very pretty crane, actually, a small size crane, which comes from their breeding sites in Mongolia and in parts of China. And they do a circuitous route. So, interestingly, many of the birds are doing circuitous routes. The path that they come in to India on their southbound migration is not the same path that they're going to go back in. They're going to take a different route. So what you can see here is that all of the world's demersal cranes, a major part of the demersal crane populations, they all breed in different places, but they will all will winter in Gujarat. So what is so special about Gujarat? What is so special about that particular latitude where they're going to be? Okay, if this particular latitude is ideal for them during the winter period, why not stay on through the rest of the year? Why have to spend so much energy getting back to the northern breeding ground? So there's definitely something that they're getting up there. So that is the story about bird migrations. Yet another interesting example. Till now, we talked about birds coming from the northern latitudes and coming down into the Indian region. And there is this recent tracking studies of this bird. Not many people get to see it or see it, but it's not very rare to see it. It's the Oriental Pratt and Goal, and the tracking studies just blew our mind off. These birds, they go down all the way down to the northern coast or coastal areas of Australia, and they come in here in India. So again, they have a circuitous route. From the tracking study, what is evident is on their return during the summer here, they are summer visitors. They breed here in India, in the peninsular India, and then go down to winter in Australia. So on the return migration, they're doing an 8,000-kilometer migratory route, and this definitely has a long oceanic stretch. These are birds that are not going to land in water, so they have to fly nonstop. So that's interesting. And this is more or less east-west or a longitudinal migration. There is latitude involved here. So another fantastic example of bird migration. So as I speak, there are many, many other species still waiting to be discovered in terms of what the strategy is and what is their migration routes or migratory routes that they're going to take over. So often when we talk about migration, people do get confused with a few birds that do move, but it is either nomadic or either those movements are associated with the early part of the life that is dispersed. So I would think I wanted to make this very clear. When we talk about migration, we are talking about prolonged periodical movements. So there is a seasonality associated with it. And from one place to another, it involves regular inward and outward or return and movement. So it is fixed to the season and they're returning back to the same places. In the case of dispersal, one-way movement away from birthplace to establish new territories. So they may not return back to those areas. So that's dispersal. And this mostly in the early part of their life. If I have to talk about nomadic movements, then these are primarily associated with local environmental cues, and the birds are responding to, say, precipitation or rainfall pattern, and are accordingly moving, and and it is not fixed in any particular year. So that you wouldn't call that as a migration. Okay, so so since we've been talking about migration and we've been talking about this associated with season, there are a few examples. So there's one example of this bird known as the common poor-will, which is nothing but a nightjar from North America, which has evolved strategies to remain in the same place where they breed during the very harshest of the conditions. So this is one bird which is known to hibernate. Okay, unlike most other birds that would move away from harsh, climatic conditions. But this is one species that doesn't move, so it has evolved this strategy. Okay, so coming to this question of why do birds migrate, we talked about this pattern of seasonal patterns associated with specific seasons and timing. It's a lot to do with reproduction. The areas that they go to breed, offers them, the best of conditions that helps them to breed better or invest in their young better. And it's also driven by the endocrine system. So there are hormonal changes that is taking place during the breeding cycle as well as post breeding when they need to return. And the habitat suitability, which is species facing habitat constraints for portions of the year. This is again tied to the seasons. So the habitat that is available to them in a particular year may be the most ideal habitat for them, but that is only available to them for a short period of time. So thereafter they have to move. So they will again move to another place where they're again seeking out similar kinds of habitats what they have been in the northern latitudes. So habitat suitability is definitely going to be important. So when we talk about moving to the right kind of places, the basic story here is that the resources on Earth fluctuate. It is not the same through the year. It's only in the tropics where the resources are constant. But whereas in the polar regions or the northern latitudes, as well as in the southern latitudes, lower down in the latitudes, the resources are in abundance during a certain time of the year. And during the remaining part of the year, much of these resources is not available or it is not there. So warm summer months may be followed by inhospitable cold. So if you're again talking about the boreal summer and the austral summer, during that period of time, the photo period is very long. So long day length. So at this point of time, the day length up in the southern latitudes is much more, is 16 hours a day. And if you still go closer to the poles, it's 24 hours. So birds are, strategizing themselves to be there in the right place at the right time when the day length is much longer. And so food availability is also there in abundance. So, but then this particular food is available only for a short duration of time because things change. It's highly dynamic in these places. So the best place to give birth or hatch young may not be a good place to find food. So it's basically that for a short window of time that they need to breed, the food may be available in plenty, but thereafter they will have to move with their young to better feeding areas and things like that. So there are such situations. So this entire story of varying day lengths is simply because the fact that the Earth is tilted on its axis by 23.5 degrees centigrade. And it moves, 25.5 degrees, and that it moves around the, on its own axis. And so this is the reason why you do have different seasons in different parts of the world. So when it is summer in the northern latitudes, it is winter in the southern latitudes or in the southern hemisphere. So the seasons are reversing. So some of these birds which are moving across these land masses are timing their movements or migrations to be in those places where it is summer or where there is a season of plenty or food is available in plenty. But then when the seasons reverse, they would have to move down. Now, this is unlike the case in the tropics where the seasonality is more or less uniform and food is available, in a more or less in a constant way. But it may not be available. It is not available in that abundance as we would see in the north. So when we talk about migrations, very important to keep in mind that the Earth still, which is influenced seasons, and the seasons because of its movement around the sun influences the seasonality. So here is one example to show you how this is by the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior, where they have tried to feed in all of the migration routes of birds that we know. And you can see that some of the birds are channeling in, they are funneling into these, small strip of land that's Israel. So many of the birds are funneling in through these areas to avoid crossing the Mediterranean Sea. So you would have one more connectivity here via Gibraltar entering into. So some of these birds, land birds, they could land anywhere, but then there is Sahara Desert here. So that's going to be a barrier when they will take non-stop flights over this. For some other birds, the rainforest of Africa is actually a barrier. Okay, they just cannot be in a very dense woodland, so they will undertake non-stop flights across. So we have very little information on what are those birds that are migrating across the Arabian Sea and going down into Africa. The Amur falcon is one, but there are quite a few others which are undertaking these crossings over the Arabian Sea and going down into Africa. So a lot of these birds are coming from the northern latitudes and then going down. So the reversal of these seasons is playing a major role in how the birds are moving. And of course, it is also the land connectivity and the barriers that is also shaping how these birds will move. So a little bit on the origin and evolution began to evolve when individuals that move from one area to another ultimately produce more young, that those that were more successful in raising young than those that remained in one area. Okay, so definitely this has been one of the reasons how this migration has evolved. The last ice ages, maybe 10,000 years ago, the last ice age definitely has had a role or influence on how some of these species moved, and those that did not move perished, but those that moved and where they moved, and to forcing them to move to better habitats has shaped migrations. Migratory behavior continues to evolve because of the changing environment. Okay, so it's not fixed. So definitely certain species are moving further down, or certain species are not moving much at all and remaining to where they are. So there have been quite a few hypotheses trying to understand the the strategies of what these birds do. So there's this which is known as the northern home hypothesis. The core idea is that birds living in the north moved south for winter, gradually extending wintering ranges over generations. Okay. Study of 800 songbird species found that long distance migration often evolved through species shifting wintering ranges towards the tropics. And the finding is that many tropical species are descendants of migratory ancestors that lost migration traits. So definitely this has to do with the changes in the Earth's climate over time. And some of these birds, which ideally would have been migrants, stayed behind because there's no need for it. And certain populations didn't move at all. The opposite of this is the southern home hypothesis, which basically states that the tropical ancestral birds moved north to breed in productive temperate regions, but returned south each winter. So the northern latitudes is definitely productive during a certain time of the year. So these birds moved up, but then have to come back because it's harsh. The gradual expansion of breeding ranges from ancestral tropical habitats northward as climate allowed. Okay, it is only because of changes in climate. So the current status of this particular hypothesis less supported by recent phylogenetic evidence compared to northern home hypothesis. So it appears that most migrant birds, they became resident with climate change, supporting northern home hypothesis. The other one is the glacial refugium hypothesis, which is associated with the Pleistocene glacial cycles over the last few millennia, shape migration patterns through repeated range shifts. So range expansion, range contraction, range expansion, range contraction, that has happened over this time period, and that has shaped what populations go where and how they're structured. Could be the same species, but moving to different places, different population moving to different places. So shifts from glacial refugia to interglacial temperate regions triggered migratory behavior in many species. I'll show you some examples of that. So migration prevalence remains stable across 50,000 years, suggesting ancient origin. So this has been shaped by several millennia of what has gone on the planet in terms of climate and how these species have responded to that. So migration evolved, this is the modern thinking, gradually through small annual movements shaped by climate change, ecological interactions, resources availability, and other selective factors has shaped the way that you see the migration in birds as of today. So there are many different types. I showed you several examples of it. There are latitudinal migrants moving from the northern latitudes to the southern latitudes closer to the tropic, and some going extraordinarily further down into the different hemisphere. The longitudinal migrants are those that move across longitude from west to east or east to west. Altitudinal migrants, like sitting here at the base of the Himalayas, there are quite a few birds that move up into the higher elevations, say 3,000, 3,500 meters. But when winter sets in again, they will start moving down, come down to the foothills and don't go much beyond the foothills. So they remain to the foothill region and doing this elevational shifts. Seasonal, predictable movements tied to certain seasonal changes. So there are some which are summer migrants, there are some which are winter migrants, or most birds are winter migrants, but definitely a certain number of birds are summer migrants. Then we have what is known as loop, different routes for outbound and return journeys. I'll show you examples of that to be able to make it clear to you. Leapfrog, populations overfly each other along migration routes, and give you some examples for that. So some populations coming from the north go down, while some of the populations that are here, it's the same species we are talking about. Some of the populations don't move much. So those populations that are in the lower elevations, lower latitudes, do not move much, whereas the populations from the higher latitudes are moving quite a bit more beyond where the other populations survive. We skip the nomadic, eruptive, and drift, because these are highly in response to local environment. Oceanic movements, long distance movements over open water, includes transhemispheric and trans-equatorial migrations. So the Arctic tern is one example, but there are other examples which I'll tell you. So there are a few key migration patterns that I wanted to bring up to everyone's knowledge. The leapfrog migration, the northern pintail populations in Americas that have been studied, where they have found that the populations that breed in the highest latitudes are going down to the lowest, while those that are breeding in the lower, relatively lower latitudes are not migrating that far south. So this is one example of this, and I'm sure there's something. I'm not saying that northern pintail here in India do that, but we don't know. They could do that, but there could be many other examples of such birds doing that. So we need to study that. Then there is the chain migration, and the example here is the common swift. The common swift populations from the northern latitudes go down to a certain latitude, but then the birds that breed in that latitude are pushed further down. Okay, so there is the shift in these different populations coming into these places. Then you have the telescopic migration, and here it's the shorebirds. Okay, a lot of the shorebirds do this. I could also relate it to the demoiselle crane example that you saw. There are populations that are breeding in the lower latitudes, relatively lower, and then there are some breeding higher up, but they all converge in the same wintering location. So those are known as telescopic migrations. So another starkly visible thing that you will notice is that migratory birds are mainly northern species. Most of the land on Earth, simply because of that, it is concentrated to the northern latitudes. So the land masses as we see today, they have moved further to the north. All of these land masses at one point of time was attached to the Antarctic continent, but they have all started to split away and move up. So bulk of the land masses are concentrated to the north. So most of the birds that we see are terrestrial species. They may be associated with wetland or primarily associated with land masses. And so they are taking advantage of moving from close to the equator to all the way close to the poles. There are migratory birds further down in the lower latitudes in the southern hemisphere. But a lot of these birds are primarily seabirds. So if you see bulk of seabirds that migrate are all down there in the lower latitudes or in the southern hemisphere. So migratory birds follow different migratory routes, as I just talked about. Within a single species, some populations may not move at all. Some may move only a short distance, and others may migrate far. Okay, and I can give you example. One of the examples is the common crane. They have a least concern species, very widely, distributed in the northern latitudes where they breed. But when it comes to wintering, each of these populations across this large breeding range would move to different pockets where they will winter. So some, like those that come down to India, are migrating about 5,000 kilometers one way. Whereas if you see in the easternmost part of China, Northeast Asia, you will see those populations are moving down, not very much. So, and all of these things have definitely evolved and has been dynamic. It may have been much more concentrated, a lot of these populations coming all together, and as of now what we see is that you do see different populations. So this is in response to post glacial events and the warming of the planet and things like that. But mind you, these are all, it is one species. They are not different species, the same common crane, but different races or different populations that are moving to these different places. So birds may be seen migrating almost anywhere, but geographic features and food availability tend to funnel them along general routes called flyways. So there's something known as flyway. Okay, there are many flyways. There are about 9 different flyways. I'll show you an image at the later part of it. So you might find one species which is circumglobal, found everywhere, found in all the continents. But then there are different populations that have formed or have evolved because of geographic barriers. So populations that you see in the Americas stick to the Americas, so North America, South America, and those that are found in Europe and further in Asia, they stick to there is no scope for them to intermingle. They may have mingled in the past, but not, ancient past, geological past, but not as of now. So they follow certain routes and they follow these flyways. That's something that I wanted to share. More importantly, mountain ranges, even within these flyways, large water bodies, river systems, coastlines, and desert create guides. Okay, so it's a landmark feature to tell them that you need to move away from this, but they also are obstacles. So for many birds, the Himalayas is like a wall. It is just simply impenetrable. They are never going to be able to fly up. So they will circumvent the Himalayas. So in order to get into India, they will have to move across. So they may be coming from Mongolia, from the central part of Mongolia, but they'll have to take a circuitous route to come in either from western part of India through Punjab or through northeast India through Nagaland, Manipur, and then come into India. But for the bar-headed geese, it's a guide to them that the Himalayas are here, the staging grounds, we need to stage here, and then thereafter fly across and go over there. So these have definitely shaped the flyways and to some extent determine destinations, okay, as to how far are they going to go and things like that. So, one of the examples of loop migration is the seabird migration. If you see through the year, they are associating with the jet streams that are, moving around in these large ocean basins. So they breed in the southern hemisphere in a few select islands, but for the rest of the year, for many years that they don't breed, there's very delayed maturity in these birds, so they would be spending all the time on the wing, moving with these ocean currents. And with these currents, they're coming across food. There is upwelling happening because of the ocean current circulation, and they're able to find food. So they're all the time on the wing, moving across these large ocean basins. So one of the examples for loop migration. Uh, so there is also this particular thing that you should know that not all birds fly at the same altitude. Okay, very often there's a question, how high do these birds fly? So we have very little understanding of this, but there are a few studies which tell us that, okay, the bar-headed geese, which has been tracked relatively quite well, so they are flying at the highest of the altitude. So that's how they're able to cross the Himalayas. But then if you look at swifts and swallows, small birds, they were flying, below 2,000 feet. So that is the region. Most migrants, however, flying somewhere between 10,000 to 15,000 feet. This is what literature says, what has been documented so far. So there are a few exceptions, but then there are a few, a majority of them which fly in this particular elevational band, or altitude band that they fly. So there are different migration strategies that in within a particular species that has been observed. So, and this may differ either in terms of the age of that particular individual or the sex, and they seem to show different strategies. Okay, so in the case of there are few examples, like in the case of in spring, some of the males they precede their migratory movement much early. They start off on their migration much earlier. So this is simply that the arrival advantage, or the early arrival, the first of the first to come, they're able to hold on to territories. So it's the males that need to hold on to their territories or defend territories. So they're migrating earlier. On the contrary, in the case of shorebirds and also in the case of cuckoos, the young follow much later. So the adults post breeding, post laying the eggs, because of the, in the case of cuckoos, you have to state, then as you know, they're brood parasites. So they nest in their host, they lay their eggs in the host nest, and then, wait for a certain time period and thereafter leave. But as the young is raised by their hosts, and it is usually much later that they are going to be fledging and be able to ready to fly. So the young are usually leaving much later, and they are on their own. So there is definitely certain innate behavior, certain things that they're programmed to be able to migrate to these certain routes. So it's a very, very interesting example. So the hypothesis associated with it, there's something known as the body size hypothesis. The smaller individuals migrate greater distances. That is basically inability to survive harsh northern winters. There are quite a few examples in that. The early arrival hypothesis is primarily those birds that show high territoriality. So it's the males that, or the territorial sex. In certain other species, the females that are territorial. So they would be, heading up first. The dominance hypothesis, which has been proposed, that there are definitely in a population certain number of individuals which are, subadults or subordinate birds, and they migrate greater distance to avoid competition with socially dominant birds. So this is the dominance hypothesis. Basically, these three hypotheses help explain why there are these differences in those individuals which differ in terms of age and sex. Now, finally, coming down to what triggers migration and how do they navigate? Okay, so it's all about the physiology. It's all about what's going on within them, and of course, this is in response to what is happening outside. So What triggers migration? It's definitely the photoperiod, which is the day length. So the changing day length triggers hormonal changes within them. The temperature, so the northern latitudes, as the day length becomes shorter, the season is changing, the temperatures start to drop. These again trigger migrations. So food supply. Now, with all of this, the food that was super abundant in the breeding areas, if you visualize in the northern latitudes, is now drastically coming down. So they need to move. They need to move to find better places where that food will be available. And the one other aspect is the genetic predisposition. So there is, the innate migratory behavior, which is ingrained deep within them in their brain, that they have to migrate, they have to move at that particular point of time. So this what triggers migration. So with all of these things happening there, the birds start to show restlessness, and this happens at the start of their migratory state. And this restlessness is known as Zugunruhe, or the German word. It's a German word for restless behavior in birds that are migratory. Okay, so there are key hormonal regulators that influence these changes. The hormone known as ghrelin, this is known as the hunger hormone. It regulates migratory restlessness, and this restlessness leads to them to start eating as much as possible. So there is hyperphagia. They feed extensively. So it basically controls fat metabolism and storage of food or fat. The next hormone is the leptin, which is basically energy regulator. It signals fuel status to the hypothalamus. Then there is also the role of insulin. Glucose metabolism influences fuel deposition. And then the last one is the corticosterone, which is the stress response. So it modulates fuel mobilization. So all of these hormones are at play at the time of migration. So physiological adaptations for this that will trigger migration is that the fat deposition in subcutaneous adipose tissue. Okay, so especially just around here in the breast muscles, there'll be a lot of fat deposited during at the start of the migration. Then the energy storage for long flights, appetite regulation, and fuel trade-offs. So each of these birds that some of these examples that I've talked about have different strategies. They would put on fat, but there is definitely certain factors limiting it, which is that even if your food is available in plenty, you just cannot keep on putting so much fat that you become so bulky that you're not going to be able to fly. So definitely there are other regulatory mechanisms as to how much you can store, and if you have enough of that store, and that fat store or your reserve is going to take you only to a certain point, not beyond that. So what we see today, if a bird is flying 1,000 kilometers nonstop, and if another bird is flying 5,000 kilometers nonstop, then the amount of food reserves that each of them could store is going to be different. And it's all to do with size and morphology, flight behavior, and overall in terms of how these birds fly, at what elevations, whether they're flying with the winds or they're flying, making hop on and hop off kind of movements and things like that. So yeah, so these are those hormones that are at play. And since we talked about Zugunruhe, this is basically a very simple experiment that was carried out by the two scientists known as Emlyn, and it was way back in 1996. What you see there is an ink pad, and it's basically a funnel. It's a cage where the bird, which is a migratory bird, that was put into it, and inside a planetarium, or even without a planetarium, they would find that these birds would during spring would keep hopping on one particular section of that cage or the box, indicating that they were heading to the north. So the other times, when the southbound, they found that they were only moving to the southern part of the cage, so the part of the cage that's facing south. So clearly indicating that their directionality or their restlessness associated it to the season, which direction they were headed. And when you would artificially control the magnetic field inside a planetarium or in otherwise, you would generally see the birds hopping all over. They're very likely confused. They don't know where is north, where is south, and so they're moving all around. So this basic, an experiment reveals that the birds are definitely orienting themselves to certain directions during a certain time of the year, depending on where they were going to migrate. So we get into the other aspects or the navigational aspects of how these birds are able to locate their destinations or how they know the directions. Definitely, while in flight, they're using certain compasses. The sun as a celestial compass is very likely being used. So they are definitely figuring out where the sun is setting and what is that location or the direction in which the sun has set. So based on that, they are able to create these mental maps that they will need to fly in this particular direction. So Starlink seem able to negotiate the proper direction only if they have a view of the clear sky and sun. This is basically the common starlings in Europe, where this bird has been subjected to a lot of this research, and they found that even if there is cloud cover, they seem to be totally confused. So they definitely need to have a clear sign of the sun, and they're using this as the compass. A lot of the migratory birds are flying at night. So they're definitely using certain other planetary positions. They're looking at that and they're able to track. So celestial compasses, it could be even the moon phase and the moon location, which could be influencing them, and the stars. So they also use the stars to check on their bearing. And there have been quite a bit of these experiments done in planetariums where they have tried to project different kinds of constellations to see how these birds are changing their flight path and things like that. Some very interesting studies that have shown that these birds are definitely responding to star locations. So and it is also known that birds learn the star map as nestlings and use this information to orient their restlessness behavior or Zugundruhe. So during days of cloudy weather, some of these birds use cues such as wind and definitely landmarks. So there are a lot of other things that the young birds are learning when in the initial stage with their parents. There are a few examples of odor map. Generally, birds, the sense of smell is poor, but there are certain research, certain species which seem to show that. And this has been done in the case of pigeons, where they found that they are able to locate their wintering sites and nesting sites based on the odor. And this odor is carried by the wind, which reach their home site. So they're able to smell their locations. Then there is the magnetic map. Migratory birds rely on an instinctual map to find the way back to nesting or wintering sites. Magnetic disturbances may interrupt their disability. So they are able to have some sense of where the magnetic fields are. Okay. And they have a sense of the compass or the direction. Many birds appear to possess a built in magnetic compass to use on cloudy days. So even if the weather is very dense fog and cloud, they're able to still fly in that direction because there is something like a magnetic compass within them. Birds tested in a controlled environment showed that they knew which direction to migrate even without the sun or stars. So physiological evidences support magnetic sensing hypothesis. A magnetite mediated magnetic sense. Okay, this acts as part of a magnetic map or a signpost sense that they have, and they know that this is the geographic position. So this is one of the hypotheses. The other one is a vision mediated magnetic compass. So magnetic modulations of certain processes in photoreceptor molecules in the eyes of the birds provide orientation by sensing magnetic fields. So to simply put it, there are certain sensor molecules in the retina of certain birds and some of these migratory birds, and these sensor molecules are known as cryptochromes, and these become more expressed in these migratory birds during a certain time of the year. It is not that they are always having it. Just before the start of the migration, and either it is on the downward or on the northbound, you will have these molecules expressing more in the retina, which is probably facilitating that vision-based, vision-mediated magnetic sensing compasses. So these neurons and a forebrain region known as cluster N shows high neuronal activity when night migratory songbirds perform magnetic compass. So this has been done, this particular paper where they have looked at a songbird, a migratory songbird, and a songbird which is a resident. And during the same time, they have tried to look at the neuronal activity in both of these birds, and you will see very starkly different pattern in the migratory songbirds. So indicating that there is the cryptochromes being expressed in the retina. So these birds are definitely able to see those magnetic lines literally as to which direction that they need to fly. And what is also believed that a simple dominant mutation is reported enough to trigger the genetics of migration direction, and which may have already happened. Some of the birds taking a completely different route, unlike a majority which are going. It's the same species, but different populations. So this is likely a result of these mutations that have shaped or influenced their migration paths and strategies. Okay. So studying bird migration is definitely a very, very interesting area, interesting field. And in India, it is still evolving. There are still a lot of technological challenges in being able to study a majority of the birds, of smaller sizes, which are possibly having bigger stories to tell you, but they're still challenging. So the citizen science based observational studies, the simple recording or reporting of birds seen in a particular area, and when you have this data across large land masses, including India and other parts of the world, and all of this data put together is definitely giving us very, very interesting insights of how or when these birds are coming in and what time of the year they're coming and things like that. It's also helping us to understand whether some of these birds are coming early in the season this year or they are later in the season. So these are all forming baselines to make future climate change predictions of what could possibly happen with these birds. There's also passive tracking methods, which is nothing but ringing birds, and either you're recapturing those birds or resighting those birds. So definitely a lot more labor involved. You need to effectively ring a lot of birds, but you never really know where they go. You will only get to know that, okay, somebody else has spotted it here. But between point A and B, how did it move? Which was the route did it take? How many places that it stop? Did it stop at all? Did it make non-stop flights? These are things that we wouldn't know. We'll only know that point A it was ringed, and then point B it was resighted. Point C, another person has resighted it or recaptured it. So you have to join the dots. But joining the dots necessarily does not tell you that this is the route that they have followed, but rather it tells you that these birds are moving from here to possibly the last location where whosoever has reported it or resighted it. But it's possible that beyond that, the birds would have gone still higher up where there's nobody there to watch it. But having said that, this is a very effective approach for a number of small birds that we cannot put devices on them to understand what's going on with their migration. The active tracking approach is the more advanced form of tracking, where it is either satellite-based tracking devices that are used or more modern equipments like the mobile network, the GSM, GPS transmitters that are used to tell us in real time where these birds are, and giving us insights on where they are stopping over, how often are they there in a particular place, what kind of landscapes that they are there on their migration. Then there are also these other devices which do not transmit. They just simply cannot transmit. So they are naturally much smaller, which are effective. But these devices log the location. They just simply switch on, take the location of the bird, depending on how the researcher has programmed it. And then thereafter, it will store them. We need to catch that individual bird again, to download the data to know where all this bird has gone. So if I'm going to be studying them today, If I'm going to be tagging a few birds during the breeding season, I'll have to wait for the bird to come back the next season. The geolocators are something very similar to that. Here, these are light logging devices. Across the planet, the light intensity or the luminosity varies across time and across the latitudes. So a bird that is there in a higher latitude where the day length is longer, the light intensity is much higher during a certain time, and if it is going to move, we are able to figure out where these birds. So, but these are small devices, and you have to wait. The level of accuracy in this data is also a huge challenge. And but of course, yes, each of these methods are quite useful enough. But if you're going to be asking very, very fine scale questions, then you really need to use high end technology. But then the challenge is that these high end technology, it's the weight or the size of the units, which does not permit us to tag smaller birds. So having said that, the technology is arriving. It is coming in. There's a lot of nanotechnology that has come in, and the transmitters are getting more and more miniaturized. So hopefully in years to come from now, we will be able to understand a lot more of these smaller birds which are undertaking long distance migrations. So this is color banding or bird banding that's taken up as an image of BNHS, where they do a lot of these shorebird banding across India. The flamingos, long legs, these color bands are quite visible. Often, a lot of people do get to see it, so you can even make out those number codes on it. And based on those reports, you're able to. So, there are these tracking systems. I wouldn't go into the details of it. So, this is sci-fi stuff. Okay. There's a lot of dedicated satellites tracking wildlife at this point of time. And then there are a lot of GPS satellites. And of course, the International Space Station also has a motherboard there, a mother computer there, which is tracking a lot of the wildlife from wildlife species around the world. So the transmitters also vary on different sizes and come in different shapes. The smaller transmitters, smart transmitters, they're lightweight. They also carry a solar panel on them. So as a result, you're able to keep the battery weight much smaller, so you keep charging them effectively, and so you're able to deploy it on a lot many smaller birds, which otherwise is very, very prohibitive. So it's not like one size fits all. It's customized. It's very, some have antenna, some do not have antenna, and things like that. This is the migratory movements of one of the birds that I'm studying, I and my team. So this is the common crane. You can see, the migration passes through the ancient Silk Route. So the ancient Silk Route through which traders would go, they would have definitely seen common cranes arriving at certain spots. And wherever the cranes stopping over through the deserts of Pakistan and Afghanistan and also northern Iran, Turkmenistan, there are all oases. So where the birds would arrive. Okay. And so these definitely the people in the early past would have looked for. Okay, these birds are going in that direction. There is definitely some water there. And so that's how these trade routes would have evolved. And these birds do something like 5,000 kilometers migration one way and then return again 5,000. So they are there in their breeding grounds in the Western steppe, that is Kazakhstan and Russia. This is known as the steppe habitat. They all migrate down into Gujarat. And this landscape, so what you have up there is the temperate steppe. A similar kind of landscape, what you have down here is the subtropical steppe-like habitat. So the cranes are not just coming down because they have to come down to the lower latitude. Why are they not going down further down south to say Kanyakumari? No, or go down elsewhere. Of course, the common cranes are also found in certain pockets across India. But all of those landscapes, wherever the common cranes are there, they're definitely mimicking the habitat in their breeding grounds during the breeding months. So these are those habitat linkages which these birds are seeking out. So we have come to understand all this through these tracking studies. A lot of small birds are currently being tracked in America. There is this particular system known as the MOTIS network. It's The Motus network takes advantage of the mobile network towers that are there. All that it requires is that they need to put a tracking station out there in this, and any bird that is passing through with a small tag, the information is being picked up by the tower. Okay. And as a result, when you know that this bird has passed through this tower 1, tower 2, tower 3, and things like that, then you're able to join the dots of many of these small birds, which otherwise be very difficult to track using satellite transmitters and things like that. This particular, it's very promising, but unfortunately, the coverage is very poor. There's much of this coverage is only there in America. So it's limited to studying some of these very small birds only to that part of America and not in other places around the world. So technology is definitely limiting. Now, there's a lot happening with the migratory birds. I'm going to end the talk with that. So we talked about these interesting facts, but as I speak, a lot of the migratory birds are on the decline. So the State of India's Birds 2023 report, it's clearly shown that many of the shorebirds, the waders, this cryptic brownish looking birds that not many people fancy watching them, simply that they're very brown and very difficult to identify and things like that, have shown marked decline, and sadly huge decline in India. In the last 3 years, the decline has been drastic. And these kind of reflect or mirror what is happening globally with this group of birds. And they are losing out majorly because of habitat loss and degradation. Okay, these are birds that occur in not in those exotic places like in dense rainforests or some things like that, but primarily along the coastal areas that are in a constant state of flux, the tidal flats. It's all about how the rivers are being harnessed. I mean, the water from the rivers are taken out, and that's also shaping, influencing these tidal mud flats. So a lot of land reclamation is happening. So as a result, there is loss of their wintering habitat. Is these habitats that they will forage in. These are habitats that they will find their food. And much of these landscapes are also becoming degraded, the tidal mudflats. So this is a huge challenge for this group of birds. And there is also hunting across much of their range, whether it is in the breeding or in the, not much in the breeding, but primarily in stopover and in the wintering sites, which is more closer to the tropics. So there's a lot of wind farms and power lines that's also coming up. The climate change, there's quite a bit of research currently happening in the European region, higher up in the Arctic, where they have started to find that the birds are majorly losing out also due to rising temperatures and unpredictable weather conditions. And as a whole, many of the other migratory birds, especially water birds, are seriously under threat due to disease outbreak. So these disease outbreak, which used to be very rare occurrences in the past, have become more common. And how humans have shaped or changed the landscapes is also influencing many of these birds. So there have been series of episodes of H5N1, which is known as the avian flu outbreak, and there's also been the case of avian botulism in India, in Sambar Lake in Rajasthan. This was not heard of before, but the first of that episode happened in 2019. And the bird flu, of course, keeps happening regularly. And during this period of time, there's a lot of birds, especially water birds, that are lost. We still have a very poor understanding of how, when does this occur, whether climate change is triggering these, avian flu outbreaks more often. This is something that we don't know. But yes, this is definitely something that is of concern. And there are a lot of concerted actions going on across the world. I wouldn't say a lot, but yes, people have started to step in, and there is groups of researchers trying to understand or predict avian influenza outbreak and how better managers can be, what best that they can do, things like that, and limited. So there are these 9 different flyways. So there are flyway scale approaches. So we talk about site-based management measures. Then we talk about landscapes, the regional, national. Then now we talk about across the range of the species. So when we talk about across the range, and when it comes to migratory birds, you need to include the breeding areas as well as the wintering areas and all the intervening stopover sites. So effectively the entire length and breadth of the range of these migratory birds is where the focus needs to be on how we can better, manage populations or secure them. And yes, so there is a bit of effort going on in this. It is good. And with that, I will end my talk. And so next time, many of you listening to my talk, when you watch these birds fly, be more curious to try to relate to this presentation as to where they would have come and what has triggered their movements and which is going to be their next stopover site and what's basically happening with them. Try to read the minds of these birds, and that I'm sure will keep you excited and interested. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a really fascinating lecture.
Thank,
Thanks a lot.
thank you.
Yeah, we've got a few questions in the chat box.
Sure.
Should I
Yes,
read it out
please.
to you?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please read it out.
The first one is by Yoganand. He asks, how do bar-headed geese decide which place to visit? I mean, few visit Himachal Pradesh, few till southern tip of India. What is the factor that determines the differences in the same species?
So this is something that has been on my head too. I've often wondered why this is happening. But what I would like to basically tell you or explain to you is that uh, you need to look at the populations that you see in Himachal Pradesh. Very likely are a different population unit. So they are probably using the western axis of the Himalayas. Whereas the populations that you see in southern Karnataka and in Tamil Nadu, these are populations that are using the Tista River to go up into Sikkim and getting out across the Himalayas through that. And these populations are very likely breeding in the eastern part of Mongolia and China. They are breeding there. So same species, but different population units that have become isolated in time and moving, crossing the Himalayas in different directions and wintering. So in my understanding, some of their movements have also been shaped by recent land use changes that is taking place. Okay, so if you look at the Pong Dam in Himachal Pradesh, there is a dam called the Pong Dam, it's a sanctuary, it's a bird sanctuary, which is on it's a Ramsar site also, which is on the Bias River. Now, the Bias River has been dammed in the 70s. And as a result, it created a huge reservoir. And in winter, when the water level is low, much of the river banks or so-called the submerged areas becomes exposed and creates the habitat where it's generally grassy meadows. And these grassy meadows are ideal for grazing birds like the geese. They're vegetarians. So they are looking for the food. So if you visualize what would have happened before the 70s, you wouldn't see numbers like the way that we see today. Okay, so a lot of the birds have possibly ended up or have changed their movement pattern or migration pattern. They're now here because they're very much on the other side of the Himalayas, which is relatively warmer. And there is also super abundant food that has become available to them now. And so they stay on. But whereas the eastern part of the southern populations that come down to Tamil Nadu, they are all possibly not being shaped so much by what has happened like in the West. So they are following their migratory routes coming down this path. So if I'm making it very simplistic, okay, but this is how I assume it's going on. But very importantly, to bring out very fairly recent land use changes is also shaping where birds would winter in India.
Hi, Devika, can I ask a question?
Yes. Okay, fine. Just go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, doctor, for this wonderful lecture. I have a question regarding night migratory songbirds. So it's divided into two parts. I'll read out the first question, the first part. How do night migratory songbirds in India, like the blue throat or various warblers, manage to navigate across the subcontinent in total darkness? That's the first part.
Okay, so you want me to? Okay, so I don't know. Okay. I don't know. Much of what I would say is based on some bit of reading on what is with the other songbirds elsewhere. And they are definitely using, star compasses to navigate. They are able to definitely detect magnetic fields, and they're very likely using that. So it's not about darkness in days when it is completely dark or the sky is not very clear. To many of these birds likely don't move, they stay over. In very bad weather conditions, they don't move, they wait for the weather to pass, and then they will undertake their journey. Okay, so yes.
Okay, so would this also make sense when there's heavy light pollution, or is it only applicable to weather? Like,
Yes, this is definitely an area that needs to be researched. Uh, yes, so if the birds are going to be entering into areas which are highly lit, how they're going to behave, we don't know, okay, because they're looking at the sky. Now, if these birds are, like, for example, the other day I was flying down to Chennai from Dehradun, and I was seeing that all along the flight path. It was a fairly clear weather that day. I could see cities all showing up. There are these light, highly lit areas from the sky that I could see. So some of these birds may also be using these as landmarks. They're probably also learning and adapting. Okay, while it may also disrupt their path, but some species could possibly be also learning, this the cities getting lit up, and yeah. But I'm just speculating. Okay, we don't know how they are responding to these light pollution issues.
okay, that answers my question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Unmute.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. Maybe we'll go through the questions in the chat box first, and then we can take direct questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So Shreya asks, how does studying bird migration influence or guide conservation action for those species?
Yes, absolutely. uh, so it can be very species specific, okay? Yeah, but it is extremely important to know when you're talking about species, it can be other species too, other mammalian species too, that have very large areas that they will range in. And here we are talking about flyways. So when you have the entire the Central Asian region, which includes India, across the from the Russian Arctic all the way down to Kanyakumari, okay, the birds are there, but it is not that they are there everywhere. They are there. The population, they are divided into these subunits, and each of these birds are using certain migratory routes. And let me tell you that a lot of these have already have changed drastically. So it's extremely important to create these baselines to understand what are these each of these birds that are flying. So, for example, most tracking studies focus on birds that are threatened because that's where you have the conservation money. That is definitely the need of the hour, priority area for work. So you take up those species and you do the research, but they're already limited, they're already few, and whatever information that you gather is very important. But then there are other species which are least concern, from conservation priority status, least concern. And these species at this point of time may be very many, but then they are these are species that needs to be documented in terms of where they are coming from, which are the stopover sites. So what we see today as common may not be common in the future. So definitely tracking the fine scale movements of birds, migratory birds, is helping shape conservation. It's influencing managers in being able to identify those wetlands which are key that needs to be protected. The next is it's also influencing at the highest level, at the policy level decision making in terms of which are those wetlands that need to be protected. For I can also give you an example. Bharatpur. Bharatpur is the wintering destination for a lot of birds. Kieladeo National Park near Agra. It's definitely an important wetland. But then a lot of birds are using Bharatpur as a stopover site. From there, they would move off. And there is also that there are these satellite wetlands all around Bharatpur, which actually act as important wetlands for the birds to be there in Bharatpur. If you are talking about Bharatpur being a bird sanctuary, that the tag is also simply because of those wetlands all around. So you need to effectively manage all of those wetlands all around in order to be able to keep Bharatpur, one of the World Heritage Sites, on the pedestal up there. So all of this you will only be able to do not by simply saying those wetlands are important. A policymaker or a wetland manager or just anybody would ask, how can we just protect everything? We can't protect everything. Okay, so we can manage. But if you know through research that these are areas that is critical, that is important, then there would be a different approach in managing those places or bringing it under what is overall conservation strategies. The one another thing that personally from my experiences I'm sharing is that tracking birds or understanding birds is not just limited to researchers. How you use this data to influence people, common people who are living around wherever these birds are migrating, wherever they're stopping over, is very, very effective. Telling the people that these birds are coming from Siberia, people cannot connect with geography. Okay. So where is Siberia? How does it matter if it is Siberia? Okay, everybody keeps coming and telling me birds are coming from Siberia. It's not necessary. I mean, you cannot. But you tell the same story in the form of a line. And you tell them that this bird has done this 5,000 kilometers non-stop flight between where it came from and to here. And that it does this every year. So this creates a different level of thinking or thought process amongst people. So very, very effective in terms of outreach and awareness. So which is one of, but yes, at the end of the day, it's science. We need to understand how these birds are strategizing, where are they coming from, and what's their current status. Devika, just tell
Right.
me if I'm going to be too explicit, I mean, too elaborate. I will try to cut short, okay? I end up talking too much. So,
Well, this was a no, it's okay. This was a 1 hour session, but it's okay. I think everyone is enjoying
okay.
and learning a lot from you, so that's okay. Okay, the next question is also from Shay. Does Hume's warbler migrate to lower or warmer regions of India during winter?
Repeat.
Does Hume's warbler migrate to lower or warmer regions of India during winter?
Yes.
Hume's warbler.
Yes. So, like all the other warblers, they do migrate down into India, but they will go down till central India. So they are coming down to warmer places. But remember that these warmer places are kind of mimicking what their summer places will be in summer. Okay, so in summer they are in the higher elevations, but during that period of time it is summer up there, so with a certain temperature regime. Okay, so when they are coming down in the winter, those places up there has become cold, but in the lower elevations or in the plains, in the central Indian plains to where they would go, it is relatively warmer, and that temperature regime kind of mimics there. So that is what is limiting ranging patterns in these birds. Okay.
Yeah. The next one is by Dr. Yojana Patil. I think you've covered a bit of this, but still, to what extent do climate change and anthropogenic technologies disrupt avian migration patterns, and what mitigation strategies can be implemented?
I mean, it is not like one size fits all, or there is one particular strategy and it will. So, what works in Delhi may not work in Bangalore. Okay, it's like that. So, if the city of Bangalore, the municipality decides that we need to do something about migratory birds here, that same thing set of strategies will not work. Firstly, because there will be different groups of birds that behave differently. So it is definitely very, very different, and the way Okay, so while we all talk about climate change impacts, it is happening. It is definitely, there's no doubt about it. There is no need of a debate on that. But very likely certain species are also adapting accordingly. Okay. How much they're adapting, who's adapting, and what species are failing in this, that we still have a very poor understanding of it. But so when I say the way the climatic influences on the birds around in southern India is different versus, okay, so let me just put to you a very, very simplified way of explaining this. Now, very often you will read newspaper reports that this year very few birds came to Chilika Lake, or very few birds, or the birds that they have recorded in any of those popular wetlands down in southern India is very few, or for that matter in northern India this year the population is very low. For example, Kashmir in Ular Lake, where I'm currently undertaking a research project, there we were looking for grey-lag geese. This year, my team has been telling me that we are not seeing grey-lag geese at all. Where have they gone? Okay, but in Al Sarovar in Gujarat, there is another famous wetland. There, this year, they are seeing unprecedented numbers of grey-lag geese. So while in one corner you are talking about decline, in another corner you are talking about increase. So, when I'm being a little cautious in how we report things, and for all this, we need to have a landscape scale understanding or entire flyway scale understanding of what is happening with populations in each of these places. Just because you happen to see there today and you have recorded this number, and this number does not match with what was reported last year, it does not necessarily mean that the population has declined. You need to expand the scope of your understanding. Okay, so coming to your question, this is one of those things. To understand these things better, we need to have concerted actions, monitoring across, like the Great Backyard Bird Count. You need to have such events happening across India and repeated over time to be able to detect trends and have those baselines. Right now, one of the biggest challenges that we have is that the baseline itself is in a state of flux. Which year should I take it up? Okay, whether did they do it systematically, whether the data reported, was it was it ideal, was it perfect, or there were shortcomings? So it becomes very complex.
Yeah. We'll just move on to the next one. Ashish is saying that a peregrine falcon has been migrating to his place every year in Bangalore, but this time he couldn't spot it, and he is asking for guidance on what approach he can take to study its migration.
Okay, Ashish, I totally believe your record of observing peregrine falcon, but you're sure that's a migratory one, because you also have the resident peregrine falcon. So you're talking about two different populations. You have the resident Shaheen, you also have the migrant Calidus. Of course, Calidus goes down all the way down to southern India. And I hope you're observing the plumage pattern. And so going with what you're saying, true. Some of the migratory peregrine falcon, I don't know much, okay, but I can just tell you based on some bit of observations, is that these are birds that are following the waterfowl. Okay, in the breeding areas, they're feeding on them, and in the wintering grounds also, they're feeding on them. So through their journeys, they're moving with the waterfowl. So in if you happen to see Calidus in your area, very likely it is near certain wetlands. Okay, and just try and relate it to your observations of whether did you see enough number of water birds, ducks particularly, in those areas. So if it was not the case, then you're very likely something is happening to that wetland habitat. So yes, so you're not citing a particular bird is important, but it is also indicating to you something is happening in the landscape, in the habitat. So I think you need to ponder over this, think about this more.
Right. Then the next question is about juvenile migration. Is it true that in some bird species, juveniles migrate before adults, and why?
Juveniles migrate before the adults. No, I know that the juveniles migrate later after the adults. There may be a few exceptions. No, I think it's the juveniles migrate later. Okay. I mean, because we are fascinated with the story of how juveniles are able to migrate without their parents. Most cases, the adult birds help the young birds to be able to figure out their place, and they teach them and they take them along. But in cases where the adults just desert the young and then they leave much ahead, and the young later join them, that's something very very interesting. So I don't kind of know whether the young in some species are migrating earlier than the adults.
Right. Does that give the young ones also some time to gain more body fat and grow up a bit more,
Yes,
maybe?
definitely that is the case. But in the case of the cuckoos, the story is different, and that's really super exciting. The simple reason being that the cuckoo's young are being raised by the hosts. So it is at the will and fancy of the host who's going to take care of you. So, so it takes time. It's basically that process of them able to successfully, fledge, and then they're weaned away, and once they're weaned away, they have to find food on their own. They have to figure out everything by themselves, even simply being able to fly faster than what your host would probably be doing. So I've had the opportunity to watch pied cuckoo and the jungle babblers. So the jungle babblers are the hosts of the pied cuckoo. So the young birds are initially learning everything what the jungle babblers do. In fact, following them, hopping on the ground and moving like that, which rarely a cuckoo would do, an adult cuckoo would do. But there will be a certain period of time when the cuckoo chick would be weaned away. And then you would notice that the cuckoo chick is kind of lost. It doesn't know why are my parents just shoot me away. Okay. And then somebody has to show a mirror to it that you're not a babbler, you're a cuckoo. And so you have to behave like this. So I think that sets in at a certain point of time. And then they start to, I've seen them forage, uh, find their own food. A babbler would be lifting leaves here, there, and picking up some insects from there. But a cuckoo doesn't do that. A cuckoo is an aerial insectivore. It has to pick up, caterpillars in the trees, in the foliage, up in the canopy. So these are something that the cuckoo chick has to learn by itself, and it's amazing how they're able to learn that.
True. Every time I learn something new and it's just so fascinating. It's crazy. Okay,
Yes.
next one is why are some migratory birds found in unusual places? And will they be able to find their way back home?
So what you're talking about are stragglers, records like that, and these very likely influenced by erratic weather patterns. It could be a cyclonic storm. That birds do make mistakes. Okay, even though that they're smart and it's all about survival of the fittest, but then birds do make mistakes. And so I can narrate you one incident of mine. I was on a ship about 100 kilometers off the coast of Odisha, off the coast of Puri, and this was an oil exploration vessel, and I was on the vessel. And the day that I arrived on the vessel, I had my binoculars around wherever I go with the binoculars. So I didn't see any birds around. But in the evening, as the big industrial lights on the ship started to come on, and I could see from the deck that there was something moving among the set of pipes, and there was a bird which I just could not believe my eyes that it could be. This is known as the slaty breasted rail. A rail which you generally don't see them fly around, and you think that they are weak flyers. But this particular bird was down there in that in on that ship, and surrounded by entire open waters, oceanic waters. So definitely it has flown in here. Of course, they can always hitch a hike. But the next morning, And late in that evening, while I was on the ship, there was cyclonic storm in the distance. There was a lot of thunder and lightning that was happening. And next day, I had a whole range of birds that ended up on the ship. I saw a black-naped oriole. The black-naped orioles are migrating from the Andamans to the eastern part of India. So, birds like that, and I cannot recollect at this point of time. There was a greenish warbler, okay, on the ship, and very tame. And these birds were going and picking up all the insects that had got attracted. So the first thing is that with the lights, there was a lot of insects coming in. Out in the open ocean, where are the insects coming? So there's a lot of insect activity also over the ocean at this point of time. So it was in the month of April, May, and it was during the return migration. So sometimes you do happen to see birds like this because they're taking advantage of just landing up in places where they can just get a little bit more food and then move on. Okay. And you do see certain other birds just, in a completely different place. You don't, like, for example, very often these days there are reports of masked boobies. These are seabirds, primarily found in the southern latitudes in the Indian Ocean. But very often they're reporting. And if the bird was rescued, and if you look back on those few days before, there is definitely a cyclonic storm. So these birds also ride the storm. They're using the winds to move with the currents. But then sometimes they do make mistakes. They just get carried away in a gust of wind and taken so far inland, and there is no wind for them to take off. So those kind of things happen.
Okay. So the next question is about birds being affected by war. So, could you please share how migration is being impacted in regions affected by wars that are also contributing to habitat degradation? How are birds adapting to these changes?
Yeah, so war, it leaves a long-term effect. Okay. The first thing is political instability, and it's a time of, basically, it's a time when there is no rule of law. There is also that in order to survive, you need to fend for yourself from whatever is available. So many people will start hunting birds. So one of the reasons for the Siberian crane, the population of Siberian crane that used to come to India, is primarily because it was all shut off while on the journey through Afghanistan and Pakistan. So a lot of these wetlands in some of these areas that have witnessed political instability for a long period of time has definitely influenced the habitats, the wetland habitats there, and also how these birds are harvested. So as I speak today, right now, many of the cranes are getting back, many of the water birds are getting back through these wetlands, and the local people are dependent on this. So in times of war, these things just go out of hand, and it is definitely having a huge influence. Okay, like for example, you look at what is going on in Ukraine and Russia, the areas where there is serious action on the ground. These have had huge influences on a lot of birds migrating through those passages. So definitely the resident birds are facing the wrath of it, but the migrant ones are definitely avoiding. Now, if they have to avoid that passage, now they have to negotiate through or navigate through certain other areas, which could be geographical barriers for them. And how are they going to do it? Or whether they are doing it? What is happening to them? Something that we don't know, but it is common sense that they will be majorly influenced by war.
Yeah.
So we should just say that we don't have such things going on. We need to watch birds. We need to appreciate what's going on in nature. Yeah, too idealistic, in my view.
Yeah. The next question is the last one. It is about flamingo migration. What are some factors to explain the significant inter-annual delay in the arrival of lesser and greater flamingos to Mumbai?
Okay, so in Mumbai, this is entirely dependent on the monsoon. Okay. And we've just been tracking flamingos. I've been tracking them for some years now, for 5 years now. And very interesting. Okay, let me give you a bigger picture. Now, you do have the greater flamingos and the lesser flamingos breeding there. That's the only area where they breed in India, that is in Kutch. Though in the Kutch region, it's a very large 25,000 square kilometer flat land. It's basically a desert flat land. The lesser flamingos breed in one area, the greater flamingos breed in another area. But their breeding is entirely dependent on this flat land getting inundated, okay, by the tidal waters from the Gulf of Kutch and from the Gulf of Kambat moving in and flooding those areas, and as well the river systems that are opening out. Very, very fascinating, unique landscape. In fact, the image that you're seeing right now is actually the run. Okay. But post monsoon, all of this area would become off-road areas. Okay, you can just take your car and drive around anywhere, but it's literally a death valley. You won't get any drinking water, so you cannot just mindlessly drive around. But anyways, what I was trying to tell you is that if in a year there is good rainfall in Kutch, and that there are quite a number of other wetlands, and even here, relatively recent land use changes have shaped how flamingos use the overall region. So, given that this is a parched land, given that fresh water is a precious commodity, there's a series of wetlands that have been made. Every village will have a village pond where those rain-fed water is stocked in. So I am noticing that a lot of these flamingos remain within Gujarat. Okay. So in years when there will be enough food available, the flamingos do not move far. But having said that, if you see in southern part of India, in the eastern coast of India, where you have the greater flamingos going down, you don't have the lesser flamingos there. We've often wondered where these greater flamingos are actually coming from Chilika, from Pulikat, from Point Calimar, from Kanyakumari. Where are these populated? Even in Sri Lanka, there are no records or reports of anywhere flamingos breeding. Possibly some pockets in northern Sri Lanka, there could be some populations of greater flamingos breeding. They could be breeding there, so they could be highly localized and resident. But what about the flamingos in Chilika and all of these places? So whether they go to their breeding areas and whether they will breed every year, because every year it will depend on what the conditions out there are. Okay, so coming to your question of what is happening in Thane Creek and those wetlands there in and around Mumbai, it is again being influenced or shaped by how it is up there. In certain years, you are seeing huge numbers, and that's a response to what has happened there. So a lot of the population has moved further down, and ideally looking for good foraging areas. So this is what I would say.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much. It has been one of the best sessions for me personally. Thank you so much, doctor, and thank you so much, Devika.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank
And sir, I would just like to greet you. I am Shreya Srivastav. I was in the last year's 9th conservation course at WII.
Yes, yes. Hello, Shrey.
Yes,
Nice to
sir.
see you.
So nice to see you, sir, and to hear from you again. And जैसे मैम कह रहे थे 1 घंटे का सेशन है पर I remember last at the institute also your session was the longest and it was the greatest. Thank you so much, sir.
If it is going to be longest, a lot of people are going to be scolding me to being yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
No. Yeah, there have been multiple appreciation messages in the chat as well. So everyone has really enjoyed your session today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm happy that the NPTEL course is going to become more popular, and very important that a lot more people become aware and
Right.
more curious. I'm going to stick onto this
Right.
word curious, because this is the
Yes,
idea of this course is that to make you more curious. You look at
Yes.
nature in a very different way than just reading.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, and it was great listening to your stories. Your anecdotes were, you know,
I should,
really gripping.
yes, I also should apologize to both you as well as Amrita for, trying to get me to respond to those emails. I was super busy. I was traveling a lot and trying to juggle between tasks. But I'm also feeling happy that finally I stuck to my word that I could do it today.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Yeah. All right. So this session will be uploaded on the NPTEL platform, and everyone will get a link to the video very soon. Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay. Thank you so much.
thank you
Yeah.
so much,
Yeah.
and my
Thank
best.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.